Hello, my name is Helena Pereira da Silva. I am 78 years old, and today I want to share with you the story that completely transformed my life. Before we begin, I would be so grateful if you could leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel. And please tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I love knowing that my story is reaching different corners of the world. The year was 1972. I was 25 years old and believed I had built the perfect family. We lived in a small town in the interior of Minas Gerais, one of those places where everyone knows everyone else's business. My husband, Antonio, worked as an accountant at the town's only bank. We had married very young. I was just 17 and he was 22. Back then, that's just how things were. A proper young lady didn't stay single for long. We had two small children, Roberto, who was 6, and Luisa, who was 4. I was what people called an exemplary housewife. I woke up early at 5 a.m., prepared coffee, got the children ready for school, took care of the house, did the washing, the ironing, and the cooking. My entire life revolved around the well-being of my family. In those days, that was all that was expected of a good wife. I remember it as if it were yesterday. It was a Wednesday in July. The winter of 1972 was particularly harsh, with a biting cold that seeped into your bones. Antonio left for work, as he did every day, carrying the brown leather briefcase I had given him for our wedding anniversary. He kissed my forehead as he always did, and said he might be home late because he had a lot of work to catch up on. This wasn't the first time he had used that excuse. Over the previous few weeks, it had become a frequent occurrence. 3 times a week, he would come home after 8 p.m., claiming to be too tired even to eat dinner. That particular day, Roberto had been running a fever since the night before. It was already past 9 p.m., and his fever wouldn't break. I decided to call the bank, thinking that perhaps Antonio could stop by the pharmacy on his way home. The bank's switchboard operator, Dona Carminha, answered even though the bank was closed. She often stayed late, organizing the next day's calls. "Helena dear, Antonio left here at 6 o'clock as he always does. Hasn't he arrived home yet?" Those words hit me like a physical slap. My hands trembled as I held the black rotary dial phone that sat on the hallway table. I thanked Dona Carminha, hung up the phone, and sank into the nearest chair, feeling my legs go weak beneath me. It wasn't the first time I had my suspicions. The signs were all there. Shirts with a different perfume, late arrivals, a growing disinterest in family life. There were also the subtle comments from the neighbors, the pitying looks I'd get at church on Sundays. In a small town, you're always the last to know what everyone else is already whispering behind your back. I put the children to bed and waited in the living room. When Antonio finally arrived, it was well past midnight. He walked in smiling, carrying that distinct scent of a woman's perfume that wasn't mine. I confronted him with what I had discovered. At first, he denied everything, then he grew angry, accusing me of not trusting him. But when I mentioned the phone call to the bank, he changed his tactic. "It's just a friendship, Helena. You wouldn't understand. You're just a housewife. You don't know how the world outside works." That night, I cried until I had no tears left. Antonio slept on the couch, and the next day, he acted as if nothing had happened. But something inside me had shattered forever. A week later, I was sweeping the porch when Jurema, our neighbor, approached the gate. She had always been kind to me, unlike the other women on our street who only gossiped behind my back. "Helena, forgive me for meddling where I'm not invited, but I can't stand to see what's happening anymore. Everyone in town already knows that Antonio is seeing the new teacher from the central school. She's from out of town, came from the capital. They say he's even rented an apartment for her near the bus station." It felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Suspecting something was one thing. Having it confirmed was another. And this wasn't just a fleeting affair. He had set up another home, a parallel life to the one we shared. That afternoon I did something I had never done before. I took the little money I had managed to save secretly. I always set aside a few coins from the grocery money. I left the children with my mother and took the bus to the bus station. It wasn't hard to find the apartment. I simply asked the owner of the corner shop. And there he was, entering the building with a young, beautiful woman wearing the kind of modern clothes I only saw in magazines. She must have been about 22, with hair cut shoulder length, wearing trousers, something Antonio had never allowed me to wear, saying they weren't for a proper woman. I didn't approach them. I didn't make a scene as many would have. I returned home and spent the entire night thinking about what to do with my shattered life. In those days, a separated woman was seen as a failure. Divorce wasn't even legally recognized in Brazil yet. How would I support my children? What would people say? How would I face the looks at church, at the market, on the street? But something inside me had shifted. His words, "You're just a housewife," wouldn't leave my head. Was that what he thought of me? Was that how he saw me? As someone without value, without the capacity to understand the world. It was that night, crying alone in the kitchen after everyone had gone to sleep, that I made the decision that would forever change the course of my story. I would prove to him, to the town, and most importantly to myself, that I was so much more than just a housewife. The next day, as I prepared breakfast, I looked at Antonio with a calm I didn't even know I possessed and said, "I know everything about the new teacher. And you know what? You're right. I don't understand the world outside, but that's going to change, Antonio. That is going to change." He paled but said nothing. He probably thought they were just the empty words of a hurt woman. Little did he know that day marked the beginning of my transformation. Perhaps you're thinking that I ran off to confront that teacher, or that I packed my things and left my husband that very day. But that's not how it happened. In 1972, a woman my age, with 2 small children and no profession, had very few options. And I have always been the type to plan before I act. The morning after that discovery, after Antonio had left for work and the children were at school, I looked at myself in the dressing table mirror. My eyes were swollen from crying. My hair, always tied in a proper bun, looked lifeless. I was wearing the same floral 3/4 sleeve dress I had sewn 3 years earlier. Suddenly, I realized I didn't recognize myself in that image. "Helena," I said to myself, "you are only 25 years old and you look like a 50-year-old woman." That's when I remembered Dona Matilda, an older woman who gave private tutoring lessons to primary school children in her home. I had always admired her. She was a widow, lived alone, and was respected by everyone, a rare thing for an independent woman in those days. Once a month, she would go to the capital to take courses and bring back new books. Her eyes would shine when she talked about education. I put on my one good dress, the one I saved for Sunday Mass, fixed my hair and went to her house. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would leap out of my mouth as I knocked on her door. "Helena, what a lovely surprise," she said, inviting me in. "Has something happened with Roberto? He's doing so well with his lessons." "No, Dona Matilda. I've come to talk about myself. I want to study. I want to become a teacher." She looked at me with her wise eyes, offered me coffee, and listened to my story. I didn't mention the betrayal. I just said I needed to build an independent future. She didn't ask questions, just nodded. "You know, Helena, it's never too late to study. You finished middle school, didn't you?" "Yes, but it was so long ago, 8 years. I don't even know if I remember anything." "I will help you. You can start by studying for your high school equivalency exam. If you're dedicated, in a year you'll be ready to take the entrance exam for the teacher's college." She explained that there was a teacher's college in a neighboring town, about 40 kilometers away. It was possible to go and come back by bus on the same day. The course lasted 3 years. "But, Dona Matilda, how will I explain this to Antonio? And the children? And the money for the bus fares?" "One thing at a time, Helena. First, let's see if you really want this. I'll lend you some books. Study for an hour each day when the children are asleep. We'll talk again in a month." I left her house with 3 heavy books and a strange feeling in my chest. It was fear mixed with something I hadn't felt in a very long time: hope. For a month, I studied in secret after everyone was asleep. Relearning math, Portuguese, history. Everything seemed difficult at first. My eyes burned with sleep, but something inside me pushed me to continue. I hid the books under the mattress during the day. Antonio didn't even notice my new routine. He continued coming home late, growing more and more distant. Sometimes he would spend the whole weekend away, saying he was fishing with friends. I pretended to believe him. Each of his lies became fuel for my studies. One day, my daughter Luisa found me studying. "Mommy, why are you reading that big book? Is it a story for children?" "No, sweetheart. Mommy is studying to be a teacher, like the lady at your school." Her little eyes sparkled. "Really? Will you teach other children?" "God willing. One day." "Can I tell Daddy?" My heart froze. "Not yet, darling. It's a surprise. Can it be our little secret?" She smiled and promised to keep the secret. That night, as I was putting her to bed, she whispered, "Mommy, you're going to be the best teacher in the world." Those words from a little girl gave me the strength to continue. When I went back to talk to Dona Matilda a month later, she tested me with a few questions. I was surprised to find I remembered more than I thought. She smiled satisfied. "Helena, you have potential. I will help you study for the equivalency exam. The tests will be in 7 months. And how much will I need to pay for the lessons?" "Nothing. But on one condition. When you graduate as a teacher, you must do the same for another woman who needs help." I was deeply moved. I promised I would honor that commitment. In the following weeks, I created a routine. 3 times a week, I would tell Antonio I was helping at the church with a charity sewing group. In truth, I was going to Dona Matilda's house to study. He never even questioned it. He was so busy with his parallel life that he barely noticed my movements. I managed the money for future bus fares and school supplies by saving from the grocery money and secretly selling cakes and sweets to a few trusted neighbors. I saved every penny in an empty yeast tin I hid inside the laundry detergent box. Time passed, and with it my confidence grew. I discovered I had a knack for mathematics, which surprised me. Portuguese was harder, especially the grammar rules, so I doubled my efforts in those subjects. One night, 6 months after I started studying, Antonio came home early and caught me with the books on the kitchen table. I closed them quickly, but it was too late. "What is this, Helena? What are these books?" They're books I'm using to help Roberto with his homework." I lied, feeling my face burn. He picked up one of the books. "Advanced Mathematics for a 7-year-old boy?" My heart raced. It was time to tell the truth, or at least part of it. "I'm studying for my high school equivalency exam, Antonio. I want to finish my studies." He laughed. A mocking laugh that cut me like a knife. "What for?" "To be more cultured when you serve coffee to guests." I took a deep breath. "To have a diploma. To be able to work if I ever need to one day." His face changed. It wasn't mockery anymore. It was anger. "Work? My woman doesn't need to work. This is Matilda's doing, isn't it? That stuck-up old woman who thinks she's an intellectual. It's no one's doing but my own decision." He slammed his hand on the table, making the books jump. "You are my wife. Your duty is to take care of the house and the children." I saw a vein throbbing on his forehead, a sign he was truly furious. In other times I would have backed down, apologized, promised to give up the idea. But something had changed in me during those months. "I will continue studying, Antonio. I can be your wife and still have a diploma." He took a deep breath, as if trying to control himself. Then his tone changed to something that tried to sound reasonable. "Helena, you don't understand how the world works. No one will hire a married woman with no experience. You'll waste time and money for nothing. If it's for nothing, then the time and money are mine to waste." I had never spoken to him like that before. We were both surprised. He stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed the books and threw them in the trash. "This ends here. Tomorrow I'm going to talk to Matilda to stop putting these ideas in your head." He left, slamming the door. After I was sure he had left, I rescued the books from the trash, cleaned them and hid them better. That very night, Dona Matilda received a furious visit from Antonio. The next day she told me about it. He yelled, threatened, said he would report me to the priest, the mayor, who knows who else. She laughed. As if I care. I'm 65 years old, Helena. I've seen men like your husband come and go. We will continue your lessons. We just need to be more discreet. And so we did. I started studying at the house of Dona Augusta, a friend of Dona Matilda's who lived on the other side of town. It was farther away, more complicated to get to without being seen, but I was determined. 2 months later I took the equivalency exams in the neighboring town. I told Antonio I was visiting my sick aunt. He, as always, barely paid attention. Perhaps he was even happy to have the house free to bring his mistress. The day I received the results was one of the happiest of my life. I had passed with high marks in all subjects. I didn't tell anyone except Dona Matilda and Dona Augusta. I hid the certificate inside my Bible, the one place I knew Antonio would never look. I now had my high school diploma. It was only the beginning, but I already felt different. I looked at the future with new eyes. The next step would be the entrance exam for the teachers' college, which would take place in 4 months. That night, watching my children sleep, I promised myself that no matter what happened, I would not give up. I was no longer doing this just to prove something to Antonio or to gain financial independence. I was doing it for me, for the Helena who had dreams at 17 and had buried them to be just Antonio's wife. That Helena was awakening again, and nothing and no one would put her back to sleep. Preparing for the teacher's college entrance exam was like climbing a mountain with 2 children on my back. Every page studied, every exercise completed was a small victory against scarce time and exhaustion. I woke up at 4 a.m. to study before the house awoke. I used the time the children were at school to solve exercises. Sometimes I fell asleep on my books and woke up startled, with paper marks on my face. At home, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Antonio no longer hid his comings and goings. He came home late smelling of women's perfume. Sometimes he didn't even come home to sleep. When questioned, he would look at me with that air of superiority and say, "A woman who knows her place doesn't question her husband, Helena. You should occupy yourself more with the house and less with books." Every word from him was like gasoline on the fire of my determination. The entrance exam would be in December of 1972. There were only weeks left. I studied like never before, memorizing formulas while washing clothes, reciting grammar rules while cooking. On the eve of the exam, news shook our small town. The teacher Antonio was having an affair with was pregnant. I found out from Jurema, who came running to tell me. "I wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it around town, Helena. Everyone is already talking." In that moment I felt a void in my stomach, not because of their relationship. I was already numb to that, but because of what it would mean for my children. They would have a half-sibling, the product of his betrayal. I confronted Antonio that same night. He didn't deny it. For the first time, I saw a trace of shame in his eyes. "What do you expect me to do, Helena? Abandon a child that hasn't even been born yet?" "No," I replied with a calm I didn't even expect from myself. "I expect you to take responsibility for your actions. But don't think this changes my plans. Tomorrow I am taking the entrance exam for the teacher's college." He looked at me astonished. "You're still on about that, Helena? For God's sake, now more than ever. What will people think? Antonio's wife studying to be a teacher while he has a child with another woman. Do you want to be a laughingstock? What will people say?" I repeated his words slowly. "That's all you're worried about, isn't it? The appearance, what they will say. Not the fact that you've destroyed our family." He shrugged. "That's life, Helena. Man is a man. These things happen." That phrase, "A man is a man. These things happen," echoed in my head all night. It was the universal justification for all the betrayal, abandonment, and disrespect that women like me suffered in silence, as if it were part of nature, like rain or sunshine, something it was useless to fight against. The next day, I put on my navy blue dress, the most formal one I owned. I carefully combed my hair and applied a discreet lipstick. I told the neighbors I was going to the neighboring town to do Christmas shopping, but in truth I was going to take the entrance exam. I left the children with my mother. The teacher's college building was imposing, an old mansion with marble staircases. I entered with trembling legs, feeling small and out of place. The other candidates were mostly single girls of 18 or 19. There were only 2 other older women like me. I sat at the assigned desk and waited. When the proctor distributed the tests, I looked at that paper and thought of all the nights of study, all the humiliations, all the tears. I could not waste this chance. The exam lasted 4 hours. I answered each question carefully, remembering Dona Matilda's advice. Don't rush, read each question twice before answering. When I handed in my test, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. I returned home, knowing I had done my absolute best. Now it was a waiting game. The results would be out in January, just after the new year. During that month of waiting, life at home became even more difficult. With his mistress's pregnancy, Antonio was increasingly absent. When he did come home, he was sullen and distant. The children asked why their father didn't play with them anymore, why he didn't take them fishing on Sundays like he used to. During Christmas week, as we were preparing dinner, Antonio came home unexpectedly in the middle of the afternoon. He had an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of shame and determination. "We need to talk, Helena." I sent the children to the backyard and sat at the kitchen table. "Joanna is in her 7th month," he said, referring to the teacher. "It's not fair to make the child be born without a present father. I'm thinking of, well, moving in with her." Even though I had been expecting something like this, the news struck like lightning. Enduring the betrayal was one thing. Complete abandonment was another. "And your children here, don't they need a present father?" He lowered his eyes. "I'll visit them on weekends and send money, of course." "Money," I repeated bitterly. "Is that how you plan to be a father? With money sent from afar?" "It's the best I can do, Helena. Joanna needs me now." I felt anger boiling inside me. "The children and I haven't needed you for years, Antonio. You were only here in body, never in soul. At least now you're being honest." He seemed relieved by my reaction. He had probably expected tears, pleas, but that Helena no longer existed. "I'll leave after the new year," he said, getting up. "You can keep the house. It's the least I can do." "I'm not asking for favors, Antonio. I'm demanding what is rightfully mine and my children's." He nodded and left. I sat there at the kitchen table, looking at the nativity scene I had set up with the children. The image of the Holy Family now seemed like a cruel irony. That night, after everyone was asleep, I cried silently. Not for the loss of my husband. I had mourned that loss long ago. But for the definitive end of that family I had dreamed of building. No matter how strong I tried to be, the fear of the future haunted me. How would I raise 2 children alone? How would I face the looks and malicious comments in a small town where separated women were considered pariahs? Christmas passed in a blur. I tried to keep up appearances for the children's sake, but they could tell something was wrong. On New Year's Eve, Antonio didn't show up. He said he had gone to visit a sick uncle in another town. Another lie I swallowed in silence. In the first week of January 1973, I received 2 communications that would change my life again. The first was a letter from the teacher's college informing me that I had passed the entrance exam. The second was Antonio's official announcement. He would be moving out at the end of that week. When I received the acceptance letter, I ran to Dona Matilda's house. I showed her the paper, my hands trembling with emotion. "I knew it, Helena. I knew you could do it. And now, Dona Matilda, how will I study, take care of my children, and the house all by myself?" She held my hands in hers. "One day at a time, my dear. One day at a time." That night, I told the children I had been accepted to become a teacher. I also told them, with a heavy heart, that their father was going to live in another house for a while. "Why, Mommy?" Luisa asked, her eyes filled with tears. Because sometimes adults need space, darling. But he will still be your father, and he will come to visit you. Roberto, older and more perceptive, hugged me tightly. Don't cry, Mommy. I'll take care of you and Luisa. Those words from a boy of just 7 broke my heart. I was the one who was supposed to be taking care of them, not the other way around. 2 days later, Antonio packed his bags and left without looking back. My hands trembled as I locked the door behind him. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly alone. Classes at the teachers' college would start in March. I had 2 months to organize my life. My first step was to look for work. With only my high school equivalency certificate, my options were limited. I got a job as an assistant at SEU Juvenile's grocery store, working part-time while the children were at school. The pay was minimal. It barely supplemented what Antonio sent for the house expenses. But it was a start, my first step toward independence. The following weeks were about adaptation. I woke up at 5, prepared lunch, made dinner ready, got the children ready for school, went to work at the grocery store until noon, came home, did the housework, helped the children with their homework, and at night when they slept I studied. On weekends I washed clothes, did heavy cleaning, sewed to supplement our income, and in my few free moments, tried to give attention to my children who missed their father. Antonio showed up sporadically, brought expensive gifts, played with the children for a few hours, and then left, leaving a void that I had to fill with extra hugs and bedtime stories. In early March, when classes began, the routine became even tighter. 3 times a week, I took the 5 p.m. bus to the neighboring town, attended classes until 10 p.m., and returned on the last bus. On those days, I left the children with my mother. I arrived home almost at midnight, exhausted, but with a sense of accomplishment I had never experienced before. At the teachers' college, most of the students were young enough to be my daughters. At first, they looked at me with curiosity or condescension. Some teachers also seemed to doubt my abilities, but they soon realized I wasn't there to play around. I studied with a determination that was almost frightening. Top grades, impeccable work, exemplary participation in class. I didn't allow myself to fail. I couldn't fail. This was my only chance to build a different future for me and my children. Gradually, I earned the respect of the teachers and my classmates. Some of the younger girls began to seek me out for help with their studies. One of them, Marta, became my friend. She was only 18 but had a rare maturity for her age. "Helena," she told me one day, "you're my inspiration. When I grow up, I want to be strong like you." I smiled, not knowing how to respond. I had never seen myself as strong, only as someone trying to survive the best way I could. The first year of the course was the most difficult. There were days I thought about giving up, days when the fatigue was so overwhelming I fell asleep on my books, days when tears would come without permission when I heard my children ask when their father was coming home. But for every moment of weakness, there were moments of discovery and joy. The thrill of understanding a new concept, the pride of receiving praise from a teacher, the satisfaction of seeing my knowledge grow each week. And so, between tears and smiles, between nights of study and days of work, I moved forward. It was no longer just for revenge or out of necessity. It was for me, for the woman I was discovering myself to be each day. A woman who was gradually learning to chart her own path in the world. The second year of teachers' college arrived faster than I expected. It was 1974, and little by little, our routine established itself. Roberto, now 8, and Luisa, 6, seemed to have adapted to the new reality. Their father appeared sporadically, brought expensive gifts, spent a few hours with them, and left. At first, it hurt to see them waiting anxiously by the window every Friday, often in vain. But over time, even that expectation diminished. My job at SEU Juvenile's grocery store had evolved. I now handled the establishment's bookkeeping, which allowed me to earn a little more. On Saturday mornings, I gave private lessons to children struggling in school, following in Dona Matilda's footsteps. Money was still tight, but we were surviving. At the teachers' college, I was no longer seen as a curiosity. The younger classmates sought me out for advice, both on studies and life. The teachers treated me with respect, Some even encouraged me to continue my studies after I graduated. "You have potential for university, Helena," the didactics teacher said. University. It seemed like a dream too distant for the poor girl I had once been. But now, after everything I had achieved, it began to seem possible. It was in May of that year that the unexpected happened. I was in the classroom presenting a paper on literacy methods when I saw a familiar face enter discreetly and sit at the back of the room. My heart raced. My hands began to tremble. 'Twas Antonio. What was he doing here? Why had he come to find me at school? 1,000 questions arose in my mind, but I maintained my composure and finished my presentation. The teacher praised my work, my classmates applauded, but I barely heard them. My eyes kept returning to that figure at the back of the room. When class ended, he approached. He looked older. He had deep dark circles under his eyes, and his hair was beginning to thin. He was wearing that gray suit I had helped him choose years before. "You were great up there," he said with a timid smile that didn't suit the Antonio I knew. "I always knew you were smart." "What are you doing here, Antonio?" I asked directly as I put my books in my bag. "I need to talk to you. It's important." I agreed to talk with him at the school cafeteria. We sat at a table away from the curious eyes of my classmates. "How are the children?" he asked after an awkward silence. "Are they well?"